So I'm here with Sarah McLellan today, a work psychologist, author and business leader with 20 years experience using people science to build happier, healthier, more human workplaces. Sarah leads Make It Human, a consulting company partnering with organizations to cultivate cultures where people and businesses thrive. And her book, also titled Make It Human, launches in June. So welcome, Sarah. I'm delighted to be speaking with you again.
Hello. Thanks for having me, Juliet. I'm looking forward to this.
Brilliant. So I'd like to ask you about Make It Human. How did Make It Human transpire?
Yeah, good question. Just listening back, that sounds it sounds like very ambitious, very grand in terms of what I'm trying to do. But yeah, it's something I feel very passionate about. It started really well. I'm a work psychologist, and as you said, I've worked with organisations for over 20 years, mainly in consulting roles. And I've also held leadership roles. So I've led big teams, most recently a team scattered across Europe, which was a fantastic experience. But really, I think it's kind of this mix of experiences, working with different organizations, my own leadership experiences, my own experiences as an employee within different companies as well, and kind of getting to that feeling that very often it feels like we make a trade-off. We decide this action is about business or this action is about people. And it feels that we're having to make these choices. And actually, I think that isn't necessarily something that we have to do. And particularly now, as technology has advanced, the things that we can do, the capabilities that we have, it really feels like there is a moment in time to actually, if we proactively go out and try to shape something, create something that makes environments, spaces, teams, cultures where people and business can thrive. So it's sort of it's a long time in the making. It's observations, it's applying psychology and science and the consulting experience that I've had over that period, but also kind of realizing that I think, like many people, things today aren't working as well as we would like them to, I think. And because we're coming back to that pivotal point of, well, it's either people or business. And right now we've got to be focused on the business because times are tough. And I think we're seeing a bit of a kind of step backwards in some respects towards some of the older methods that might have got us so far, but are they the right things to take us forward and into the future, as very much I know is a topic you're very interested in exploring. So yes, a big topic, but something that I think we have a moment in time now to really shape something different around.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Let's talk about this because company cultures have been creaking for quite some time. And is definitely a relentlessness at work, a demand on people to get stuff done, be the best still, be ahead of the curve, because we know it's tough, right? The last few years have been incredibly tough for people as well as businesses. And it's interesting because I see the word human used a lot, all the buzzwords, authenticity, all that stuff comes through. So if we drilled it down to what you talked about then, making it human, what kind of make it human is that we're asking?
Yeah, what does it mean? Yeah, and you're right. I think the word human does get thrown around a lot. I think to answer that, first of all, it might be helpful to sort of think about some of the challenges, the problems that we're facing. And as I mentioned earlier, in organizations today, there are, and you said it too, there are issues that are repeatedly linked to culture and the way things are done. That's just how things are done around here. But actually, if you look at a lot of the data, it's it's often showing us that engagement is is dipping. I know there was recently some data from Gallup that said it's dipped again, particularly across the US, but also particularly for younger generations. So they're coming into organizations or not. They're coming into remote roles and interacting in virtual spaces, and they're not really getting what they want and need from it. So I think at the minute we're in this point where, actually the pandemic kind of gave us all a taste of something different. We had that need to reinvent. We had a need to survive that kicked us into something that we hadn't really experienced, thankfully, a lot of us collectively on that level anyway. But as individuals, it obviously sparked the Great Resignation, people going off saying, actually, do I want to do this day in, day out? Is this meaningful? Can I find something that's a bit more purpose-led? And obviously that, sparked big changes in workforces. But now, we're facing a new set of challenges in the world around the economy, political unrest, uncertainty. Everything is tough. And if you're a leader leading a business right now, yeah, absolutely. This is a really, really tough period. But then what we're getting is this kind of tussle, almost this sort of tug of war between people and organizations, because we're sort of stuck in between old and new models. And I think one thing that I do fear is that if we don't step out and say, right, well, let's really think about what it is that we as businesses and we as people or humans need to thrive and to do things better, then I think there is a very real risk that we end up going back down old paths and old methods. And we're seeing that a bit in decisions that are being made, quite cutthroat, even abusive environments are being exposed from a culture point of view. And you hear stories of people who have worked at organizations for years and years being fired by email, or firing lists being circulated around businesses. And you think, well, hang on, these are people who are making decisions about people. I'm pretty sure that they don't really want to be doing things that way, but we're sort of stuck. So there is this problem that is now really facing us head on, that if we don't deliberately step out and think, what could we create, what do we need, then I think the pressures that we face could mean that we head down something that almost becomes more inhumane in the experiences that we're creating. But on the other side, I do think we have huge opportunity to do something different, because there is motivation. People have had a taste and gone, actually, we want something different. The next generation is certainly saying that, remarkable kind of the shift in priorities that they are, the things that they're saying are important to them. And in many ways, work and careers are starting to play second fiddle to what are the other things that I can do with my life. How does work fit into my life, not the other way around, which probably more for our generation wasn't necessarily the question we were trying to solve, at least for certain periods. So yeah, I think it's really important that we try and answer actually probably what is a different exam question to what's gone before. Previously, it was very much about how do we produce more things in as short a time as possible and make as much money as possible. So, productivity and obviously industrial revolution, that's a lot of what is frankly still shaping a lot of the systems and roles and priorities that we see in our businesses today. But actually, the question that I think we need to focus on now is much more about human growth. Because if you think about the problems and challenges and solutions that we need to find as people across multiple organizations and different types of roles, really it's about how do we use our knowledge, and how do we learn new things, and how do we collaborate to apply that in a way that collectively helps us to do more. Because the technology, robots, AI, they'll help us do the automation and the tasks and do it faster, quicker. We've got to turn it into something that has impact, that is meaningful, that people can relate to, that advances some of our thinking and solutions. So actually, if you think about what is it that we need to solve for, what conditions do we need to create, we need to help people feel safe, secure, that they're part of something, that they can share learnings and they can talk about things that they find hard or things that have gone wrong. Because if we don't, we're not really going to make progress as humans in our knowledge and, collection of intelligence. And I think right now, what I see is a lot of organizations not sure how to do that. How do we make that shift, make that change? Because they're used to running things in a very, outputs, things, tasks, tracking financials. If you push this button, that will happen. And unfortunately, at this point in time, a lot of those approaches are creating feelings of anxiety. People are feeling exhausted, they're burning out. And there is a limit to how long, that can carry on before things really start to break. So, so I do think we're at that point now where we really need to think about what really is our purpose as human beings in organizations on this planet, and how do we collectively use that? And I do think it comes back to the conditions that we're deliberately or not creating. That's a big part of it.
Gosh, there's a lot to unpack in there.
Yeah.
I think that the first thought that came up, and you will know this, is that for quite a long time, people had been fired over email or by letter or over the phone. I remember those days quite a lot when you'd read it in the news. So actually, maybe that hasn't shifted. But what I think has shifted, and what you talked about, is that the pandemic, whilst it's been extremely difficult, and so many people are still struggling with the after effect, because we're still going through some of that, right?
Yeah.
But it was like you said, it was a moment in time where we went, actually, this is the first time that most of us have ever experienced anything like this in our lifetime. And it's been relatively stable, particularly in the Western world, right? It's been quite stable. And I talked to a number of people during that time, and I was coaching them. And what they couldn't grasp is that there was no support around for them, because suddenly the rules didn't exist and what we knew. You had to make it up as you went along. And we were looking at the government, at various organizations, going, give us the answers. And actually, no one had the answers. We just had to make it up. So how are you going to support your people? So I think you're absolutely right. The last few years, and I still hold lots of opportunity and hope that we're in this period of uncertainty and tension. I mean, real tension, where it's a bit like a pendulum swing, isn't it? We go one way or the other. So actually, at the moment, you're seeing quite a swing to, we're just going to bring people back in the office. We're going to tell you what to do. We're going to give you the structure and rules because it worked before. But actually, it's still all up for play. And I think what you're saying is, and certainly what I've seen is, people want better. People want different, because some of us have had that experience, or some of us see that experience, and they want better for themselves, but also for their families and their people around them, because they're still all juggling. What does that mean? How's that going to work? I need to work. I want to work because I love working. But how am I going to integrate that into my life now to support all of that? And that's the big question. I think that's $1 million question right now. But there is an opportunity to do that. You and I know that, because, we've built communities that have done that. So how do you almost like widen that to an organizational level and a global organizational level where we know it's possible?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I remember those you're absolutely right. In the depths of the pandemic, when we were all looking at each other going, well, I don't know what to do, how do we, but then we kind of got to this point where obviously it became a new normal, and we realized that we needed to adapt, because we can, that's what we do well. We do adapt and evolve. And actually, I think one of the moments I remember, because I was leading a team in the UK, and they were, they'd moved from, they were predominantly kind of client facing, out and about, meeting with clients and delivering assessments. So we were delivering, one-to-one and group assessments, and it was all face to face. So suddenly we've got to move that online. We had lots of things to consider from that point of view, but also just individuals. How do we manage this this extent of uncertainty, which is exceptionally draining? We all felt depleted, exhausted. I remember we had lots of conversations as a whole group, of people with different roles, sales roles, consulting roles, operations, marketing, just about how can we move forward together. And we had some great ideas that came out, and actually I think a lot of it boiled down to, yeah, exactly as you said, there is no playbook. There's no way to deal with this. But what we can do is think about the habits that we have, the points of interaction that we have as a group. What would help us in this scenario? And a lot of it was finding a new structure and routine, because we're all in our own homes, but we need some of that regularity of, okay, I know I'm going to get time with my manager one-to-one. I know I'm going to get time as a whole group. But actually what we started to do was talk more about the things that were going on outside. It's simple things like we had conversations around nature watch, because people weren't going out. You saw different types of animals in your garden and things like that. So, or great TV series to watch on Netflix or whatever, because you needed these things to get you through, but also practical things as well. I've just delivered this for a client and I used XYZ system. Here's what I learned. Those little bits of learning. And I think quite often we feel stuck in cultures and organizations because it feels so big and broad, and we think, I don't know how to change that. But actually, if you distill it down, it really is, as we know, it's the collection of individual actions, behaviors, habits that roll up into, this is how things are done around here. So if you break it down, then you can start to work out, well, actually, what would be helpful here? And if you're going back to, well, if the big question that we need to solve is, how do we create environments where people can bring their best selves, they can feel that they're supported, they can collaborate, they can create ideas, they can share what they think, even if they're not sure whether it's the right answer, then you can kind of work out, well, what are the ways of working, the practices that could help us in this environment. And the challenge with it is that it does kind of involve a bit of an overhaul of the whole system that we've known for such a long time. So at the heart of that is leaders know the answers. Leaders, they've been there, they've done this, they're there because they've got the years' experience, and they've encountered every scenario under the sun. We are encountering new scenarios every day. So we need leaders who are comfortable with, I don't know this answer, but I'm going to ask others what they think, and let's collectively work through what could be a good next step. And that is a massive shift. And that's why I think we see this, bouncing back and forth to, well, this is how I knew things. This is how things got done. This is what I feel comfortable with. And that causes tension, because we've had a taste of, well, this is how things could be done. And as you said, people have a desire for something better, something more meaningful. Also because we could well be working for, gosh, 60, 70 years. It's a long stretch. Whereas before the question wasn't that much amount of time. So it's about sustaining people and organizations and bringing the best out of them. And I don't think there's been lots of great research, lots of great insights, but we haven't quite achieved that move from one operating system to the other. And I think that's what we need to start with small steps, trying to get to.
Yeah, that's really interesting, isn't it? And I was thinking about a couple of themes that have really strongly come up in the people I've been talking to in the organisation I've worked with over the years, is absolutely the habits. Number one, our own habits as well as those around us. What are they? But this talk about community, people are missing this community, because when everyone was pushed online, you were suddenly isolated and you didn't know how to show up. And I love the examples that you gave around nature and what are you watching, and because that's how you build that community, and it makes it more human, right? It's but humans aren't perfect, and I think we have to remember that we haven't been on this planet for that long. Really.
No.
So it's still an evolutionary curve that we're going on. And now, with everything that's going on in the world, that's even more so. But this piece around being able to, it's almost like redefining leadership and success, and what outcome do we actually want?
Yeah.
And then how do you then recognize that as that you're not going to know all the answers? I teach a lot of improv. I do a lot of improv in my coaching, and it is about that. It's about, it's, you don't know everything, but if you ask other people, or if you say a word like us talking today, if you say something, then something else will happen, another idea will happen. And it's that improvisation that we can embrace, I think, as people. We don't have to know all the answers, Crumbs. That's why you have teams, and that's why you have communities. But there is something around that: habits, communities, redefining, what the outcome is that we actually want. And then how do we bring everyone along the way with us?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another part of it is awareness of that as humans, we have bad habits.
Terrible ones.
Terrible habits. But it's awareness that, I think the other side of being human is being aware that your ego does impact how you behave, particularly at senior levels, leadership levels, but as individuals too. The way we process information, we shortcut things because our brain does that to help us remember things, but it means that we're more prone to bias, and we copy and obviously emulate what other people do. So it's kind of building in that awareness that actually what we're doing is nurture. Everything that we do is nurturing a culture. It's saying this is acceptable or this isn't. And I think we need to get more conscious about that, because if we're in a world now, which I think we are, about thoughts, feelings, what's said and what isn't said being really important, and perhaps more important than what gets done, as our world start to change, then those elements of culture, what guides people's decision making and actions, that kind of subconscious, we need to kind of make more conscious. And I think there are things that we can do. It changes the game if you are thinking about outcomes that are linked to, well, I want to create a team, a workplace, an organization where people can thrive, then the outcomes that you're looking to are not just what can we deliver each quarter from a financial point of view? Don't get me wrong, that's really important. But actually, you're going to try and look ahead of that, before that, and after that, to say, well, what do I need to deliver that? I need happy people who are healthy, who can sustain the levels of work that we need, who feel connection. Things like friendship. I think we need to talk about more, because why do you come into work? Why do you feel part of something? It very often is because you've got that connection with a few people, and at the end of it, as an individual, that's something that you will value a lot more highly than probably how many reports you managed to produce across your tenure. But it's bringing much more to the forefront the things that we often take for granted in how we're designing and setting up our organizations and cultures. And there are lots of companies, I think, that are starting to take steps towards that. They're thinking about the types of leaders that they are identifying and putting in place. They're thinking about management, which is something I feel very strongly about, having been a manager, but also managed managers and seen how significant the impact a manager can have on individuals, if you are able to get them focused and working in the places where they have most impact. And for me, that is if they're able to build trust-based relationships, because obviously I think trust is one of the big things that pins this all together, and that's something that we're struggling with. But if we get managers and we design management roles that really emphasize, well, I want you as a manager spending as much time as possible with your team, coaching, supporting, enabling, having difficult conversations, because that is part of it too. We need to be stretched. We need to understand where our blind spots are, how we could do more, how we could grow, and taking away some of the tasks that just bury managers, that just keep them stuck in the middle and processing things and tasks. And they're this cog in a very big system. And very often, unfortunately, people feel very excited to get to a management role and then really disappointed because they think, oh, I can't actually do all those things I thought I could influence. I now can't. And I think that's a great shame. But actually, that's something that you can deliberately design for. And that was something that we did in the organization I was at previously. We had a piece of transformation and a chance to go, actually, where do we want our managers spending their time? How do we design things so that is their priority? And when we did that, the impact was really huge, just on the relationships, it takes time, but trust, the growth and the impact on clients and result, it all follows. So I'm a real advocate for, a lot of people are saying, actually, is it time to take managers out? I think it's time for a different type of management.
It's redefining what that is. You describe it as the messy middle, and I describe it as management. It feels like a sandwich, because you've got leaders and the board and organizations coming down here and dropping stuff down. You've got people and the teams coming up going, this is what we need from you. And you've got this poor manager who's often going, I want to help you, but I have a list of all these tasks and outputs I need to deliver. What about me? And so often those managers forget about themselves, and that's where this burnout will happen, this dysfunction will happen, and actually they're pretty miserable. So it's that squash, isn't it? It's like being compressed. More and more is coming this way, and actually we really do need to define what that actually is. What's the role of the manager?
Yeah, completely agree. And we do, and that's part of the system, the move-in system as well, is that I mean, when I was at SHL, we did a piece of research that using personality data across lots of managers, and essentially what we revealed, what we found out, is that today across the globe, because this was only last year, most managers are showing natural potential, so natural preference for
Yeah.
being an expert. So they're more like an individual contributor than
Yes.
a manager. And that, you can really see that play out. So it's basically telling us that the people that we're promoting or the people that we're hiring into people manager roles are the people that are really good at individual contributor roles. They are the best researcher or the best accountant, and we've gone, they're brilliant at that. Why don't you go and manage this team and be responsible for a group of 7 or 8 people? And of course, then, the problem is they probably don't really want to do that. They might do, but chances are that they don't. But the bigger challenge is that they don't necessarily have the skills to then manage because, as we know, it's a completely different profile. So it's about being honest about what people management is and what we need people to be doing. What are the skills and the behaviors and the potential that is going to make a difference here? And then getting the right people in those roles. And that is a big move that could have a real flywheel type impact on your culture and your organization, because then you're freeing up their time. You're getting people who really are motivated not necessarily by themselves and their own progression and development. That's certainly part of it, but the big thing is how being able to have an impact on somebody else and see them grow and them develop. And that really is what I think we need in people management roles today, but we get confused about it, and so it causes all sorts of issues.
And I love that bit of research because it absolutely that rings true, doesn't it? The research that you found last year. And I think in my experience, and I am generalizing here, but the people who want to be that next level, it's a drive for money, title, seniority, and they quite like doing some of the team stuff below. But and when they are put in that position, it's much harder than what they expected because there is almost like the demand from the organization to do more. And on the other side, some of the best managers and people leaders I've worked with and hired are the people who don't know they're doing it. So it's the people that are moving between the teams, connecting the dots, almost like it just happens. And there's this natural gravitation within that team, where they are the subject matter expert for sure and the specialist, but there's something that they're doing that is engaging the team and supporting and leading and guiding and coaching and mentoring and all the stuff that naturally comes. So it's really interesting. So I think from an organizational point of view and a leader point of view is recognizing some of those people and then not going, I'm going to put you in this role, but then supporting them and coaching them along the way to see, is that actually what they want to do? Is that the future they want? And then you help them with that. Because most people won't have thought about it because they go, I don't want that title because I've seen what it does. People are knackered, working 12 hours a day. They don't want to do that. So, then how do you build that environment for them?
I think that's a really good point. It's looking in different places, like the people who it's not necessarily the star. You might hit the jackpot and get someone who is brilliant at the core stuff and managing, but actually, as you say, it might be the person who naturally the team gravitate towards. If the manager's not there, what happens? Who do they go to? Who is saying, I've got a client meeting coming up. Do you want to come with me and just experience, creating learning opportunities? Who's enjoying sharing feedback and sort of say, look, I saw you do this really well. I think you could do a little bit better over here. It's those natural kind of skill sets that we really need to find and nurture. And the other bit is to value it, because I think, like you said, managers can feel undervalued, exhausted, because they are just overwhelmed. Everything comes at them. So there's the peeling back part of where do they have most impact. but also the rewarding it for what it is and valuing it and holding that up as a skill set in itself. I think quite often in the design of our organizations today, we see it as a stepping stone. So it's a rite of passage. You've got to go and manage. If you want to take your career further, then it's something that you just need to do. And then you get people feeling that is the way they have to progress. So the other thing, and I did a lot of work with this with lots of different organizations around creating career paths that are for people who don't want to manage, because otherwise you're forcing everybody into this one room. And that's where some of the damage can come. So yeah, I'm a big fan of a talented people manager. I think we undervalue them, and actually if we find them, we empower them and we get them doing the stuff that really gets things ticking in our organizations, then really they are massive culture creators, and they're the ones that can make a difference day to day to people's experience at work. So yeah, I think that's a if you're looking for somewhere to start and you're an organization that has a reasonable manager population, actually that can have a ripple effect.
Absolutely. So we've covered a lot, Sarah, and it feels like there's so much more that we can talk about. But can you share a couple of tips to get, I mean, you've shared a couple throughout here, but a couple of tips to get people started to think about how do they make it human in their organization?
Yeah, good question. Yes, I can. I think so. I think I'd start with thinking about, as you know, as we did at school, the exam question. What is the big question that we're trying to solve, and thinking about how that has shifted. So as I said, I think it has generically for us across organizations. I think we need to move from it being about how do we produce things, how do we get faster, more efficient, more profitable. That's still important, but technology will help us with a lot of those things. So really the big question for us is creating environments where people can grow, creating climates for human growth. And that's a big part of the Make It Human model, and something that I talk about quite a lot. But I think that then gives us the foundation for targeting actions and habits that enable us to create somewhere where people and then business can grow. So I would say zoom out and think about that bigger question would be one thing. The second thing I'd say is as we've just been talking about, is looking at your culture creators. Because as we said, culture is this thing that just happens. It feels big, it feels complex. But actually there are individuals who really are having more of an influence over others every day. And they are leaders and managers in particular. And we talked a lot about managers. But I think we do need a new profile for success. So, and that doesn't happen overnight. So we need to think about what are the skills, what are the behaviors, and it is more the human side, the openness to ambiguity, the comfort with inviting others' thoughts, being more humble, prepared to, I might not have the answer here, leading with empathy, being able to connect and build trust-based relationships, and wanting to understand people. I think if we get people in roles who have that motivation and interest, then they're naturally going to want to create environments where people can grow, and then of course businesses grow too. So I think I'd spend some time looking at culture creators. And then the final tip I'd have is, as we talked about a bit earlier, is habits. So we all have a role to play in shaping the cultures, the teams, the environments that we're in, and habits can make a massive difference. So if we each proactively think, what's important to me? What is going to help this team that I work within feel more connected? What is going to help us learn and grow? and and enjoy things more, have some fun, feel connected, feel socially part of something. Habits create ways of working, and then that over time creates a culture. So I think we all have a role to play in thinking about purposefully the habits that we're adopting, and you can change those very quickly. You can
Absolutely.
decide to
Yeah.
do something next week that just brings people together or creates a different point of conversation and stretches skills and muscles in slightly different directions. So yeah, those are my top tips.
Brilliant. And I think, when you said changing habits, you're taking that temperature check, aren't you, along the way to say, how's it feel for me? How's it feel for the team? But it comes down to that awareness and stepping back. So I love those. They're great.
Fab. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Loved our conversation, Sarah. I will pop all the links into the bio below, and people can connect with you on LinkedIn and sign up to your newsletter.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Julia. It's been a delight.
Lovely.
And my book comes out in June, so just a
Exciting.
few weeks' time. Thanks very much for having
Brilliant.
me.
Thanks very much.